So hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is actually our third virtual edition of PR Reimagined, where we will explore today how COVID-19 is driving this shift in the media landscape and how it has changed media consumption forever. Obviously, we're living in very different times over the last few months, and we're very much looking forward to sharing having our panelists share what they have seen change over the last few months and how we're anticipating even more change going forward. I'm expecting this to be a really highly insightful discussion. We're looking at B2C content, we're looking at B2B content across a variety of different media platforms. So I think everyone is really going to get a lot of value out of this webinar today. And I'm very grateful to you all for taking the time to join us. So just some logistics to get us started today. The event will last for 1 hour, and we will have an opportunity to do some Q&A, and I ask for you all to send your questions to the chat function. I'll be keeping an eye on your questions coming through, and please, we really appreciate the questions which you send through, and we look forward to answering as many as we can. We are actually going to be trying out something today, a poll using a Zoom feature. So nothing better than getting actual live responses from you all. And we can really gauge how you're feeling about different things. So I'm looking forward to seeing that come through. Kudos to my team for kind of getting that that feature working today. And then, we want you to use social media, please. Like, we're having some really good traction as a brand right now for ourselves. Our hashtag is Go There. Everything Media Frenzy does is about going there, pushing our clients that we work with to the very limit, and really, really building their brand and amplifying what they're really, really strong at. So please use hashtag Go There. So without further ado, I'm really, really thrilled to have our team, our panelists, our expert panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to pull up a slide, which is going to start that process off. And if we look at the slide, Tristain, I'm going to ask you to go first. You're the first one next to me. Please introduce yourself.
That's me. I'm Tristain Trenkle. Currently, I'm an associate producer at NBC Universal. In the past, I've been a producer for Viacom through BET, a digital producer and brand builder for Sister Circle here in Atlanta. And I've been in the business for over 15 years. So I've done a lot, seen a lot, and I'm ready to chat about where we're going.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tristain. Okay, and Deanne, you are next on the slide. Over to you.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing? I'm Deanne Heckert. I'm based in Atlanta. I started with Modern Luxury 18 years ago as an intern, and I have done every job in between. I am now market president. Just a little information about Modern Luxury if you're not familiar. We are based in Atlanta, but we have 85 plus titles and 22 luxury markets, making us the largest luxury media and events company in the country.
Great, thank you, Deanne. It's great to have you. And Vaughn, please, over to you. And
Hi,
Vaughn, you are on vacation this week, and so we are extra grateful for you joining us. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. I am on vacation. My name is Vaughn Morrison. I am the head of U.S. video production for the Associated Press, based in Washington, D.C. And I've got a long background working for CNN, for TV Guide, for Fox Sports Net, for Jib Jab Animation, a lot of different media platforms and types of content, and a lot of consulting along the way.
Really good. So everyone can see how dynamic this team is, so much experience. And so let's get started. So we have some really, really great questions to ask you all. Let me just stop sharing the screen, which introduces you all, which has gone down right now. Great. So, our first question, very important question. So, and this is, I'm actually going to ask Vaughn to answer this question initially. What is the biggest issue you feel the media industry is facing right now?
Well, I can tell you with the news industry, our ability to cover the news has been greatly affected by the quarantining and shutting down sort of physically out in the environment where we gather the news. Our ability to do interviews, in person to person. Our ability to be at events has been very restricted. We have to be very mindful of the safety and health of our staff, as well as just the willingness of interview subjects to meet in person. We've adjusted a lot to doing Zoom interviews, but there's no substitute for being out there physically covering news events as they happen, and that's been an enormous difference for our sort of our day-to-day news coverage.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, Deanne, I know you have a perspective of how things are, what the industry is facing right now from your point of view. Can you share that?
Yeah, so what we're hearing is that about 61% of businesses are making short-term strategy changes, and only about 9% are making long-term strategy changes. And for modern luxury, we believe that business as we know it, content consumption as we know it, has fundamentally changed. And so for us, the rules are gone. The initial plan is dead. Now it is about watching, learning, evolving, being as flexible and as nimble as we possibly can, being as big of an organization as possible that presents challenges. But we believe that that is crucial right now to not just surviving, but also thriving and delivering the content that our audience wants and needs most.
Yeah, you're right. Everything has changed. So everything is out the window, anything is possible. Yeah. So Tristain, what about from NBC's point of view? Completely.
So I think, as the industry as a whole, especially television production, we're really looking at, I always see television production as a contact sport. It's a lot of, preparation, and then let's go. When it's go time, everyone, all hands on deck. So now it's kind of figuring out how do we scale back these large scale productions that we've been doing and still deliver a consistent message and a quality product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a major challenge because large scale productions are something we're just not able to happen right now.
Exactly. So we're, quick fixes. There are like robotic cameras, there's of course virtual event halls, virtual meetings that we've been seeing a lot pop up and might cross over to mainstream production that you'll see on TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of creativity.
Yeah.
We're going to get onto that later. That's a really interesting point. So thank you all. Okay, so how has the pandemic changed the type of content that you provide to your customer? And Deanne, I know there's a lot has happened with the type of content that you provide, the changes there.
Yes, we've had to pivot a great deal. Home and real estate is still a priority for our luxury audience, but in a slightly different way. I think everyone has been home so much, and maybe they're tired of looking at specific rooms that they should have or would have renovated or remodeled. So remodeling is extremely important now, more so than ever before. And to be more specific, to put more fine of a point on that, home gyms and home offices. What does the design look like for those? What's functional? What's possible? And how fast can they do that? Fitness, in-home exercises, Peloton versus going to Orange Theory Fitness, the online classes and the spaces and the items that you need at home to do that. This one has been really informative. We've learned a lot about boats, RVs, and glamping. I don't think I've ever learned so much about luxury RVs, but I now consider myself an expert when it comes to that. These are all things that, we certainly covered boats and yachts, but covering it much more so, talking about family vacations and family activities. That's really where that glamping and the RV element comes in. And we're seeing a lot still in trust categories. We consider trust categories to be finance and legal. People are nervous. Things, again, have changed, and they want to make sure that the people that are protecting their families, their lives, their legacies, that they know who these people are and they really trust them.
Yeah, that's really great perspective. So much has changed. Your whole content calendar just blew up, basically. Yeah. And so Vaughn, from the Associated Press, I know it's a very different twist. So what have you seen, how the pandemic has changed the type of content?
Well, it's been a very dramatic story. It's a story that affects every single customer, every single end user of our video and all of our news products. And it's something that the Associated Press is primarily a B2B. We also have a B2C business. But in both cases, we hear very direct feedback from our customers. And this is a story that affects everybody. This is something where we are getting constant requests. The level of scale for this story, the amount of coverage that we're doing, the urgency of it, the speed that we can deliver content to our customers, the sort of depth that we can go, because every single angle is of interest. As much as we can provide the audience for video coverage of the various angles that will be affecting them personally and their families and their communities, it's absolutely essential. And really the type of content we do a lot, and video news does a lot to humanize stories and to really see the effects of stories through the eyes of real people. And that has never been more important, telling those kinds of stories, than what we're doing right now. And the demand for that has been loud and aggressive and something that we've been very responsive to.
Yeah, it's amazing when even though this sounds so obvious, it's like, has there ever been a story which has affected 100% of people? It's like, this is the story, this is the pandemic. And so you're right, it's coming at you from every corner and you're having to support it for everybody.
Absolutely, it's what we do.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, wow. Tristan.
I think that
goals.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've seen a big focus on family content now that everyone is in the house together 24/7. So, NBC Universal released Trolls, which they had planned to release this summer, wide release in the multiplexes, but pushed it earlier straight to streaming. And that was very successful as a family property. And I think you'll see a lot more of that. And then, with all the protests for social justice going on, I think we're seeing a lot of curated lists of content that are out there already on streaming that we're able to, kind of revisit that maybe weren't looked at before.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah. It's so adapting the content. What's so great about pre-recorded content, you can decide, okay, now's not the right time to do it. And then Trolls was exactly the right time to do it, which is great. But there's other type of more versatile content. Yeah, you're having to change how you put it all together. So interesting times for NBC, I'm sure, right now. Events has been obviously something. Look at our event. PR Reimagined used to be in person. We turned it into virtual. And we love that. Actually, I think we might continue this. But Deanne, I know, with social distancing, events are being majorly affected. So, and Modern Luxury really stands on doing many, many events. So how are you handling that?
So events are about a third of our revenue stream. So it is definitely a priority for us. We did cancel hundreds of events nationwide. We put thousands of events on hold. But I'm excited to say that, Atlanta was one of the first cities to open back up. So Atlanta naturally will be the testing ground for modern luxury events moving forward. We do have our first event currently scheduled for August 20th. But the events will no longer look anything like the events used to. And I think that's okay. I actually think it's exciting. We almost had event burnout, not just in Atlanta, but across the country. The same concept of cramming as many people, 200 people, into a room in a 2-hour period who were standing in line trying to get food and beverage. That no longer interests maybe anybody. So for us, it's all about changing the way we look at events. The concepts will be different. The ideas will be different. It'll be interactive, although socially distanced. We'll see smaller numbers. We will see more private parties. So for example, our event on August 20th is supposed to be a seated dinner for 150 people, 5-course tasting meal. We can't do that. Yeah. So instead, what we're doing is bringing in smaller groups of 40 for more of a brunch version. We'll then sanitize the entire space. We'll bring in another 40 for a luncheon. And then at the end of the evening, we'll bring in another 40 for a cocktail toast with a small award ceremony. So we'll still get the same numbers through the door, but in an entirely different environment.
Yeah, that's completely changing the business model. Like you say, a third of the revenue. So you've got to keep some events going, but yeah, 40 people and social distancing to make it happen. And like you say, lots of sanitizing in between.
And one other thing, you know, I used to joke after 18 years at Modern Luxury, I used to joke that when my days were done here, I would never attend another event ever for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I think that I speak for a lot of people when I say I'm ready.
Yes.
Please invite me to something. Let me come. So yeah, I think that we're on the precipice of a turnaround on events, although very different kinds of events.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So Tristain, you know, tell me about, you know, some of those big events, the production events, like you said.
Right. So productions are often huge. Live audience is out. You know, we can't have an audience of 100 people. I think, you know, gatherings are capped at 10 still nationwide. So that energy that you get from a live audience, it's often ignored, but it's definitely something that translates to the quality of the performance being given, you know, the feedback. When you watch Family Feud, for instance, the feedback that Steve Harvey is able to riff on, a lot is coming from the audience.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So it's finding now, you know, creative ways to keep that energy the same and consistent, and also being able to produce these things, because you know, I work on shows that had smaller staffs of up to like 20, but you know, a regular staff is 60 plus people with grips and camera. So it's really rewriting how we do business. Yeah. And I think we're figuring it out along the way still.
Yes, I bet you are. Completely different. Gosh. Unless you can bring in that pre-recorded cheer in the background.
Right. That might help a little.
Help a little bit, add some razzmatazz, but you're right. I mean, people feed off each other. I mean, we're social human beings. We feed off the reaction from the audience. And so it's going to change that and hopefully open up something else completely different. What about Vaughn from the Associated Press? I mean, that's what the Associated Press goes out to these events and you capture this information. How is that being changed for you?
Well, I mean, the changes this year have just been mind-bending. The you know, news happens in so many ways in crowded situations, in locations where there are people brought together for a news event. And it's hard to imagine. When we started this year, you know, we would have expected the presidential campaign to be the top news story of the year. And here we are. We have not had a mass campaign rally since early March. The ability for the candidates to get their message out, of course, is having to be sort of reimagined, but our ability to cover that sort of vector of how they campaign has been completely changed. They are, certainly Joe Biden's been doing virtual events, and we can cover things that happen at the White House, and we have access to the president at various levels. But nonetheless, the traditional campaign is very, very different this year, and that's made things very different for how we proceed to deliver our political coverage. And even the protests that are going on nationwide, you know, we've been out there covering, and we have to protect our staff to make sure that they're safe in covering these events. And we've had changes in that, like, for instance, we can't have staff share gas masks because there would be sort of a risk from the virus. So these are all things that we have to take into account in how we're pulling together our plan, our logistics for everything that we're doing every day.
Yeah, I bet you are constantly tailoring it, changing it. Very interesting. So I'd like to ask, like, how have you all determined kind of what your customers want right now? I mean, how do you know how to make these changes? Because it's really easy in isolation to think this is a change we need to make, but you know, listening to your customers, how do you do that? I'd love to kind of get some feedback from you all. Deanne, why don't you share your point of view there?
We have small groups of what we'll call influencers, or groups of trusted, our audience that's really trusted. So for example, I have a men's committee, we have a home/interiors committee. I've got an advisory circle. I will say that we're lucky because although we're a huge company, we are very locally based and we're really entrenched in the community. And my audience is very vocal and very bold. And I appreciate that. So we are certainly listening to those trusted groups. But in addition, I am jumping, much like this, on every single Zoom call for every single industry that I can possibly get myself invited to. Not necessarily that it makes a whole lot of sense sometimes for who we are and what we do, but the more you know, the better I believe that we are able to tailor that content. So it's all about just taking in as much information and learning as much as you can right now.
Yeah, yeah. That's great though, if you've got that, you know, that the community, as you have to listen to them, and the fact that they share things with you. I mean, that's the ideal scenario, isn't it? That, you know, you're not running a poll, you're actually, you get that feedback. So it's very important. Tristan, what about from your point of view?
You know, I think social media dictates a real-time reaction to a lot of content that you're putting out. So it's not hard to grasp a general consensus of what people feel about a certain thing, what maybe they recognize that you thought you could get away with. Would it be a bad edit or, you know, some sound problem? So I think generally TV shows that are put out and have their own social media accounts and stuff, you can really source information so directly from people who are consuming it.
Are you having people tell you how much they miss? I mean, I'm assuming you're playing reruns of past shows, are you?
Yeah, so I mean, right now it's, you know, it's hard to escape, right? So we often turn to media to escape so much. And, you know, there have been comments that I've seen just that I can't flip to another channel and escape everything that's going on. It's protests, it's a pandemic, it's, you know what I mean? So mentally, I think, yeah, we're trying to figure out how to deliver content that is informed, but also provides an escape.
Yeah, no, I could definitely agree with you. And Vaughn, how do you listen to what your, you know, more B2B customers need from Associated Press right now?
Yeah, and I suppose in some ways it's more straightforward in that we have a very robust customer base. Most of our business is B2B. We have very tight relationships with our customers. They're very vocal about what they need. And it helps that we have a B2C business as well, so we can understand some of the dynamics that are driving consumer interest in news coverage, in news stories, the types of things that we're doing, so we can anticipate what our customers are going to be needing for their you know, end users as well. And that makes it a little more straightforward, I think. But yeah, that's certainly a big part of how the Associated Press works, is keeping in very close contact with our customers. No different here really than how we've always done that.
Yeah, okay. So Vaughn, from your point of view as well, I mean, obviously the pandemic has, you know, we've talked about the fact that it's kind of restricted us, we've had to alter our processes, but what creativity have you seen? Have you found that there's new, better ways, more creative ways of doing things that when we hopefully get past this, that might be something you adopt within the company?
I mean, doing Zoom interviews for video, and I'll speak, you know, specifically to video, that was something that we would do occasionally as needed. If there were somebody that we needed an interview with that was just physically in a location that made it inaccessible, or that the speed was so critical that it was just the fastest way to get that interview. I would imagine that may be more become more of a staple for how we do business. Yeah. I think we've gotten better at it. And I would speak of the news industry in general, not just the AP, but I think all of us have gotten to doing better Zoom interviews, finding different creative ways to provide visuals that help to illustrate points that are being made, and to connect that to the stories that we're building. I think that part of it has been a refinement in our game that we didn't necessarily choose to come at, but that it's been something that has been a real critical part of how we do news, and I think that'll probably be with us for a while. So
what do you mean by finding visuals? So how did you do it before, whereas you might be doing it now?
Well, if we were out covering the story of somebody providing sort of marshaling church donations for a food pantry. And we might go out to the location and see what they're doing and speak to the people that are coordinating this and speak to the people that are benefiting from it. And we're still able to do that in a lot of ways, but in certain cases, we might not be physically able, or the food pantry itself may not be allowing people to come through. And so what we can do is provide a Zoom interview. We can deliver a lot of user-generated content. So perhaps the food pantry has people that are shooting video on their iPhones that they can share with us. And we can find still photos that can help illustrate these things. So there are ways that we can be creative around finding the right visuals, nonetheless, to be able to tell that story, even if that physical access isn't an option.
That's interesting, because you raise a point, which is like people using their own phone, and then that's much more authentic photography. And we've been talking about authenticity for the last couple of years. It's been a key word. You know, people don't want such candid, videography and photography. And so it's interesting that I wonder whether that will become a trend a little bit more. We're going to get to trends a bit later, but that's interesting with, nothing better when you see real photography or real video taken from an actual human, because you kind of believe it a little bit more. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But Tristain, I know things have changed a lot with, like you said, those small productions. So what creative things are you seeing happening?
NBC's SNL, I think, has done a great job during the pandemic. They came on, I think, the first week, everyone went into lockdown. Nobody had costumes. They were holding up, notepads and whatever they had around the house. And then within 1 week, costumes were shipped out. You had new characters. People were figuring out what you can do from home. So it was just really, I just love to see how much in 1 week they progressed. And then the next week they got even better, and they were playing with Zoom calls and things that now are all part of our lives. So things that, you wouldn't have talked about before. You're focusing on celebrities or whatnot. Now we're talking about, working from home and the things that are really going on in America right now. So I really like them as a creative beacon, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, they always seem to get it right, don't they? They always seem to get it right. Deanne, so creativity. Tell me, I can imagine there's a whole swarm of really intelligent brains trying to figure out how to be the most creative over modern luxury.
Yeah, so I certainly have to be careful of proprietary ideas and concepts. But what I would say is the rule book is out the window. Out of the box ideas is an understatement now. And we are asking more people that maybe we would never have asked their opinions or their ideas or their concepts before. So we've really been tapping into our intern base, into brand new employees at Modern Luxury. We do a publisher summit every year where all 22 publishers come together and brainstorm. We put together our biggest and best ideas into booklets. We've gone back to 10 years ago to look at those ideas, specifically the ones that we said, absolutely not, too hard, too difficult, impossible. We would never do that. Anything we said we'll never do, that means we're revisiting it right this moment. So that's what I would challenge anyone out there, is to get really creative. One perfect example of that outside the box thinking is, and maybe this sounds crazy, but sometimes the best ideas are the simplest ideas. So we never went to any of our vendors and asked them to advertise with us or asked them for their stories. I mean, not in a selfish way, but just in a, these are our vendors, this is who we work with, this is who supplies us. And so we went to each one of our vendors in the middle of the crisis and said, what's going on with you? How can we help? What's happening? What do you need? And specifically Alpha Graphics, who supplies all of our giant blown up cover boards, all of our pamphlets, all of our paper documents, our signs and our banners. They were really having a tough time because all of the trade shows had been canceled. And so they had found a small niche of schools who wanted to print schoolwork and information and send it out to all of their kids, specifically that private school audience. And we said, guess what? We know every single private school in the state of Georgia. So let us let's work together on an ad campaign where you can specifically target those private schools.
Yeah, that's really good. So any idea can become a good idea again. And I think, we need to dig deep. I think you should have that filing tray which says, when we file things in the future, never just get rid of it. It's like, this could become a good idea one day. Who knows what's around the corner? So what about trends? I mean, what are you seeing, Deanne, I'll start with you, like for trends, which you foresee happening from the pandemic? Is there anything particular you think, or you're interested to see what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so we think a lot of the trends will continue, although there's a lot of stuff that's been frustrating or disappointing or hard during the pandemic times. There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of good that's come from it. People have reconnected with their families. They've had more quality family time. So we think that type of content will continue to be incredibly important to our audience moving forward, more important than ever before. The one item we're really watching, we're very interested in, is social influencers. For so long, we were on this, we were in this rat race or this rat wheel, and it was move as fast as you can and hire social influencers, and people didn't have time to really look at the data. And were those social influencers, I'm sure they were maybe gaining them likes and followers, but did it move the needle in terms of revenue? And people have actually had time to sit back, businesses, and take a look at that. And what we're starting to see is that social influencers for people are changing. It's the people that matter to them most, that's closest to them, that are now driving more decisions than ever before. So we are extremely interested to see how that plays out. Does that continue and how that evolves?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So yeah, we need to keep an eye on those influencers, because who knows, how important they're going to be going forward. Yeah, that's really good. So Vaughn, what about from the AP's point of view in terms of trends that you might see continuing?
Well, I mean, we've seen usage of our content just in general has shot through the roof. And video in a year-over-year measure is an enormous beneficiary of that, is even more than other formats, to the extent that so many customer publishers are relying on video to drive engagement, to drive usage. And I would expect that those trends are going to keep on going. It's not necessarily specific to the pandemic. It's happened during the pandemic. And I would imagine that those dynamics are going to be very visible and measurable, and something that will continue to be a priority within the industry. And I guess the story itself, I mean, it's really hard to imagine how this story is going to keep unfolding, how that will affect, as we talked about, sort of the election, how that will affect the ability of public events to even happen, and how that is going to continue to affect then journalists who cover that world. And I think that's something that we're all really pretty urgently concerned about. Wanting to make sure that that is something that we're all being as smart as we can on how we can chase out.
Lots of question marks, aren't there? Like, to all those areas, like the rally, like you say, maybe they may decide that, that's a big expense for these politicians to do these rallies. Maybe there's a better way of doing it. I don't know. Some efficiencies may come out of this, so very interesting. Thank you, Vaughn. And Tristain, what about from NBC's point of view? Are there trends that you're seeing or that you're anticipating will come through?
I don't know about NBC's point of view, but my point of view, trends that I'm really watching, I'm interested in like the Quibi experiment, the Quibi app, which was, a $1.8 billion funded app by Jeffrey Katzenberg. And it did short form content, but with high Hollywood production value. You have Liam Hemsworth in these, you have just really A-list backed short form video content. And what they aimed at originally was that time that consumers were spending commuting to work back and forth. So they're 10-minute episodes. And all of a sudden when they launched, it was taken away. So we're not commuting to work anymore. So I'm interested to see where the short form goes, where the streaming apps go, because, you know, people are looking elsewhere. There's only so much you can consistently watch on Netflix and Hulu. So people are looking for other avenues to find entertainment. So I think that should be interesting to see after this, you know, if it is able to grab that commuter space,
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah, because our commuting has really reduced significantly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we need to keep an eye on Quibi then. So that sounds very good. So some great trends which may be coming through. So really, really good discussion. There are so many question marks, I know, but just, you know, the conversation we're having now, even from a month ago, I'm sure there's just so much has happened, so much change. So you guys sharing your point of view on this is just so interesting. Thank you. So we have a series of questions actually, which have come through, which I'm delighted with. And I definitely want to kind of go through some of these so we can make sure that we are listening to our audience as well. First question is that now that some of our society is starting to open back up, how do you anticipate content consumption shifting again? So we know obviously there's been a huge amount of content consumption. We just actually ran our own survey globally with 13,500 consumers. And as you would expect, content consumption has significantly increased across the world in every country. People have more time on their hands. But what do we think is going to happen in the next kind of 3 months' time? Are we anticipating the same level of increase? Does anyone have a point of view on that?
I'll speak on that. I think that you definitely will see fall off as people start to return to work and other activities that, you know, take them away from being glued in front of their TV. Once those bars open again and happy hour's on, we're going to be out in the sun. It's summer. But I do think that, you know, we've seen like The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan, ESPN, Netflix documentary, very long form, just so in-depth, focused on different things. So I think that was a great success, and you'll see more in-depth, long, you know, make sure you're here this Sunday to watch part 3 of so-and-so. I think that's a trend that will definitely continue.
Yeah.
And I would say from a news standpoint, it may not be a direct effect on news consumption based on things reopening, because the story itself is still so dynamic and so much still going on with it. I think one of the things, though, that will make it interesting and will add a lot of detail to the story and a lot of concern to the story is the variety of results that we may be seeing from a public health standpoint based on which areas reopen and which don't. And for our customers, it's not just the United States. This is something that is a global story. In some ways, the fact that this virus is somewhat outside, or at least in its initial form, is somewhat outside of politics, it affects every human being. So it's something that's been at a certain level a great equalizer and an ability to be able to see how this plays out once very different countries start taking different strategies on it. Certainly within the United States, various states and communities taking different strategies on it. The story itself will become that much more complex, and it'll be driving continued interest from our consumers in how this plays out.
Yeah, that's great.
I agree with Tristan. We'll see some fall off, but we also believe that a large portion of the U.S. may continue to work from home, or at least with flexible hours through the end of the year. So, so again, you know, no one's more ready for a happy hour than me. But I do think that we'll still see increased content consumption because there will be more flexibility for the rest of this year than maybe most of us have ever had.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So just before I go on to the next question, just to let you all know, our attendees that I've just launched the poll. Didn't realize that was sitting on me to do. So I've just launched it. I'm delighted. I saw that I had to do that. So, and people are starting to respond right now. So that's really, really great. Please, I do encourage you all, please do respond to this poll, because it's really going to give us a really good kind of health check of where things stand on some specific questions. So thank you. Okay, so we have another question through. How to balance COVID and social justice content? Also, what content are you looking for. So, and that's a really great point. And we did talk about this earlier this week when we all got together. It's like, there's been two major stories, global stories. I'm going to ask Vaughn this initially. How have you been able to balance COVID and the whole social justice story?
Well, the stories themselves have, there are a lot of overlapping angles. This is, communities that have been under stress from the virus have been very affected and been a big participant in what are going on with the protests and the marches. And ultimately, how the virus itself is addressed, and I guess the mechanics of our democracy that are brought into bear in solving a public health crisis, we're going to have really high critical effects on the minority communities specifically. So there's a lot of things that we see are ways that those stories do, at least in some levels, come together. And to the extent that there are more marches that we can go send from a video standpoint, that we can send videographers to go cover, that in health things may not happen with quite so much drama out in public spheres. So I don't know that it necessarily requires doing one or the other. We are jumping in to cover both stories in the ways that they are separate and the ways that they have overlapping dynamics.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. Tristan, does that question affect you at all? Is that something you can...
Not particularly, but I'm great friends with Fran, who's the entertainment reporter at 11 Alive here in Atlanta, and just watching her try to flip between the two, because it's a lot going on. We just had our primary voting on Tuesday, and there was a lot of news stories coming out of that, which is one of the cases where it did overlap. It was found that COVID, the new restrictions, wiping down the machines, sanitizing, this was something that did actually hold up these poll lines, these voting lines. So seeing her balance the two, I don't think it's an either or, but I definitely think, you need to talk about everything.
Yeah, I agree. Deanne, what about modern luxury?
I can answer the event piece. So is it regarding events, worried about safety? Yes, absolutely. We are terrified, right? We don't want anyone to get sick. But somebody does have to be the leader. Somebody does have to test what we can do safely. What are people comfortable with? And with Atlanta being open the longest at this point, we feel like that there is a very safe and cautious way to do this and to do it right. But we will be covering all of our bases to make sure that everyone is protected as possible.
Yeah. You guys hold a lot of events. You want to continue that. So getting it right. Yeah.
And people want those events back, right? They're getting ready. It's just making sure that we do it right and we have the right formula, which takes a lot of creativity at this point.
I agree. So we have actually a question for Tristan here. So because of social distancing, most productions have been on hold. Do you see this impacting the cadence of content being released in the future?
So yeah, I do think that smaller stories will begin to be told. Going back to Quibi, there's short form scripted content on there, and because of that, because it's short form, they have to keep the characters identifiable. So a lot of these stories involve 2 or 3 people that you follow through a season. So I think we'll start to see smaller stories being told like that. A restructuring of how we're shooting, definitely. Zoom calls, separate rooms, all this is gonna come into play now, pretty much, and through summer. So, we'll kind of just have to see what happens once we open up and try to, abide by all the safety measures and put precautions into place. But it's anyone's guess how well that turns out on the other end.
So can we be expecting to see chefs filming themselves at home?
Oh yeah, I mean there are definitely workarounds. I have my little ring light here for this Zoom meeting, so
Yeah.
you know, I have a friend who works in an agency that covers food preparation for all of the daytime TV shows, and they were just booking out chefs originally. And now it's turned into, from an agency to more of a production company. Now you're showing people that you represent how to produce their own content in the home so they can be placed out in the world on these shows that are still looking for this same content, looking to deliver the same kind of experience that their viewers are used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I'm loving all these questions coming in. So, oh, someone says, I love Tristan's energy.
Hey.
You've all got great energy, but Tristan, great energy. And I'm loving Tristan's hair, Carla. I told him that earlier. So another question, has user-generated content affected you positively in any way? They put, it's on the rise more than ever with everyone at home or practicing social distancing. How are you leveraging this for your audience? So this user-generated piece is very interesting. And Vaughn, I'm going to ask you to talk about that. We kind of touched on that earlier with people creating their own content and sharing it with you. So has it positively affected you in any way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, user-generated content has been a staple of news video now for quite a number of years. But so much of real life now is happening where only user-generated equipment exists. And so the amount of it that is coming through that has a news component to it or can be used in a news context has really grown. It is certainly a big focus for the AP to be just paying attention to all social media platforms, being in touch with people that have newsy video. And as we are developing story angles to go cover, we can also be mindful of what visuals are going to help with that. So as we've seen, I think we did a piece a few weeks ago on how married couples are sort of grappling with so much time together. And it's more of a sociology, I guess, sort of review of current America, but nonetheless, it was something that was really interesting, and really to do that, we really needed couples that could share, that were shooting video and could share that video with us, and that led to us having a really sort of interesting and insightful story. You know, UGC was a huge priority for us a year ago. It'll still be a big priority long after this virus is gone, but nonetheless, it's something that has been a very helpful tool for us in our news coverage.
Yeah, okay, really good. Deanne, Tristan, user-generated content.
Yeah, I'll second Vaughn. It's a great way to find new content, new stories. I mean, just in Atlanta alone, I have 6 publications. That is a lot of pages to fill with really interesting content. And we love seeing all these personalities and these characters on their social media and creating content. We love to find out who they are and what they do and spotlight them and help them grow. So it's helpful for us because it brings you know, interesting, dynamic articles and features to the pages when we really need it most right now.
Yeah, most definitely.
I think, I mean, I love user-generated content, and I've seen such a growth of people, you know, during the pandemic as we're all locked in this scrolling pattern for 8 hours a day sometimes. But so I really enjoy that. And I really enjoy, you know, seeing established actors and other public figures who now have more time on their hands and want to engage with their audiences for the first time, maybe. So that's something that, yeah, definitely.
We can get to know them even better now because there's a chance for them to really show themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, really, really good. So we've had 80% people complete our poll, which is pretty good. I would love to get it to 100, guys. Come on. But I'm going to just share some of these findings with you all. So I think they're quite interesting. So we asked a question: on average, how much time do you spend consuming online and television content? And 46% of our respondents said they spend 3 to 4 hours per day online. That's a lot more, I think, than any of us. We didn't have 3 to 4 hours per day to spend. I know I didn't.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. And only 4% said they spend less than 4 hours per day. So there's some people, 18% are spending more than 4 hours per day. So just shows how important social media is now. I mean, you know, it's incredible. This is the platform for brands right now. This is the time. Next question was, do you spend more time on social media now than before the pandemic? So this is actually related to social media. And no surprise here, 79% of us said, yes, we do. So like you say, we're scrolling constantly. And I do agree, it is an escape, isn't it? It's, and I think some people are getting upset about, I know even my children actually who use TikTok, they're starting to find TikTok is becoming quite serious of a platform, because you've got, you know, there's politicians on it and there's news on it, and they wanted initially to do TikTok to dance.
Yeah.
And it's been filled up with everything else, just like every other social platform. So it makes you wonder, is there going to be another, you know, new versatile kind of dancing platform? Like, let's just make it truly innocent for these kids, because that's, TikTok is changing. So yeah, social media obviously is on very high usage. And then where do you receive most of your news? 31% said from television. So we're still watching TV, which is a good thing. 41% from social media, and 28% said from online. So social media definitely, like I say, that is the platform where brands need to be really investing their time right now. So I'm really grateful for everybody who has completed this, and the numbers are going up. I'm on 85% right now. This is brilliant. Thank you all. So I think we're up with all the questions. It's been, I have learned a lot from all of you. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your knowledge in this really interesting time in our lives. And you all look so happy and healthy, and I'm grateful for you, honestly, just being here today. So thank you. I look forward to staying in touch with you all. And thank you to everyone for joining. I hope you got a lot of use out of this. So thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye.